this computer. Okay, well, excited and looking forward for this. So welcome everybody here and on Facebook, where we're streaming this event online. My name is Rehearsal Mocha, and I'm an artist and the director of Draw to Perform. And today we're launching a new program, a new online program that I hope will continue for a while. It's the studio visit for artists, a 1 hour program, and that each time we're going to visit like different artists that relating to drawing and kind of relate also to performative drawing. Okay, and for the first program, I invited Kevin Townsend to launch and host us in his studio. I'm going to, this is the introduction, which I was kind of struggling with, but now I will informally will tell you a little bit of the idea that I came and the need that I found in terms of doing this project. So here we are in the pandemic. It's 1 year almost since the pandemic started. And we all struggling, we all trying to communicate. And I noticed that quite a lot of people and organizations really from the first moment were quite active online and share with us quite beautiful things and opened our mind and I was, and as the director of Draw to Perform, I was just wondering, you know, it's quite challenging for performance artists and people that doing live art or people that like to share their process it's quite difficult to find ourselves in this situation where we struggle to communicate and we are limited to show our work live and to share, and most of all is to collaborate live with our audience to get a live respond, and probably this is some of the conversation will lead towards there. And but after a while, I realized that we as an artist, we are really can you hear me? Kevin, can you hear me? Okay. So what I said is that I realized that we as an artist, we really used to be alone or be isolated or kind of like being locked down because we are people that spends quite a lot of time in our studio brainstorming, doing our own actions. But there is these moments that we need for our soul to step out of what we're doing and to share our process and to communicate with people and with other artists. And that's where I said to myself, this is the there was so much, like in this last year, there was so much time given us to spend more in our studio. People were brainstorming, were working, were sharing few of the pieces over the internet with the wonderful things that they are doing. But I really wanted to connect one-on-one with people and to try to see what, not just what they've been doing, but also to kind of like visit them online. And I thought that well, it's an experimental thing, and I don't know what will be today, but my idea was to see, not just to visit and to see what's going on the walls, but actually to have this kind of like a peek, and you know, like a quick peek to the artist that doing live action in his studio. It can be some kind of like a presentation or a short performance, or whatever people will come up in the future regarding this subject. And of course, that's what we will do today. So, and it will follow by questions and discussion. I will start with the discussion with the guest artist, and then it will open up to a conversation, a wide conversation, and that's more or less the format that I was thinking about regarding to this program. That was the introduction for the program. I'm going now to introduce our first and amazing guest artist and studio visit for Kevin Townsend. And thank you very much for joining us, Kevin, and for open your studio to us. A short introduction is that Kevin is an interdisciplinary artist and a professor. He lives in Kansas, and you can read quite a lot more online, but from a personal point of view, Kevin traveled and joined the second international back then we called it a symposium, the Draw to Perform Symposium, because it was like 3 days of meetings, I think. And it was in 2015, I mean, I think, yeah.
Yeah, 2015.
2015 in London. And Kevin back then, the whole symposium was all about durational performances, and the format was a live performance for 6 hours, and Kevin split it to 2 performances. One happened outside of the venue, and the other one was inside of the. It was kind of like a performance space and club where a large venue where all the artists did their action, and Kevin was right next to me performing for a couple of hours, and it was really a blast to see him live and to work with him. And I'm really happy that we are doing this meeting, and really hope for more collaborations and actions in the future. I think that's about it from me. I'm giving you the stage, Kevin.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in. I'm pretty flexible with how things are going to go because this is the first time this is happening. I kind of treated it like I would treat any other studio visit with people coming in and have a way more prepared than we'll be able to talk about or engage in. I have set up a bit of a very brief performative piece that is that I'm happy to do for you all. I do have some video and I can talk a little bit more about my practice if that's of interest to people. I can definitely walk you around and show you what's happening in my studio. But before any of that, I just want to piggyback on what Ram said and just sort of introduce sort of where I'm coming from here. My studio is in downtown Kansas City. I've moved here 3 years ago. I'm not from the Midwest of the United States. I've never lived in the Midwest. I've always lived on the coasts before now. And one of the most amazing things that happened here by moving here is there's a gigantic arts community in Kansas City. And for the first time in my life, I have a studio that is larger than my home. I have a 3-year residency and my studio space is about 6,000 square feet. It is immense. And I make drawings that don't last often. I make ephemeral work. I do make large work, but this is a very new era for me in my practice to be able to have space where I can make drawings at the scale that I'm normally performing my drawings for the first time. For the longest time in my practice, those things only lived in very small pieces of paper and in my head. I can't move that direction right now to show you, but I have an entire wall where I can sort of rehearse now for the first time, and I can actually get my body in shape for durational drawings at the scale that I'll be working at, which is amazing. And then the pandemic happened and I'm not doing any public performative work. So I have this weird conundrum. I have a big, huge space that's ready for brand new work. And now I'm trying to figure out what kind of new work does it want, or what kind of new work do I want given the way things are changing? So it's an interesting moment to have a studio visit, I think, because I think like many other people, I'm in a place where I'm beginning to think about what does performative work look like with the public now? What kinds of things would make the public comfortable in this? What kinds of things are compelling or interesting? A huge part of my practice has always been filming the work and making the work for the camera and thinking about the performative aspect for the camera. The other thing that's interesting to note, and I'm wondering if any of you all are experiencing this as well, is that I'm reluctant to want to go that way now that that's the way we have to interact. To me, I'm less interested in making performance for the camera now that that is the default way to make work. And so it's, to me, that's a real tension right now as a maker, and trying to think about how do I want to exist. For me, that in-person thing has taken up so much more value. And the intimacy of humans in the space of other humans has become much more sort of salient in the way that I'm thinking about what's happening next, for me anyway. And I'm curious, for those of you that are here, I'm assuming this is something that you're interested in and thinking about as well. So I'm hoping as the conversation opens up that we can talk a little bit about some of that stuff too. And it's not just 100% about me and my work. I think the way that the order is probably best is if I bring you down and I can sort of show you around my studio here, in this little wing of my studio. It's a big L-shaped studio. And in one corner, I have a piece set up that I was going to work on a bit. I can show you the studio a little bit. I can try to get the camera set up. I can add the few marks that I'm going to add to this piece here for you all. And then we can sort of play by ear how we'd like to proceed from there. Like I said, I have stuff queued up on my screen that I can pull up and share if that's the way people want to go, or we can just have a great conversation. I'm definitely open to that. But let me move this camera here down to the other end and I can show you what I have and talk a little bit about what I'm hoping to do here. I'm sorry about walking with the camera and I'll try not to make you all nauseous. Because my studio is the shape it is, this section behind me here is sort of my work area. And then this section behind me here is where I can sort of have almost mini exhibitions in my space and be able to put stuff up and live with it a little bit. So a lot of what I have on the walls right now are, they are or were rehearsal pieces for other projects. So like these pieces on the wall here were made right as the pandemic was starting, this piece and this piece that's here, and then this one over here. So there are 3 sort of rehearsal studies for a show that I was doing in this building. There's a huge gallery in this building as well. And they were the study pieces that were done for that very large drawing that was 360 square feet. So it was a 36-foot long wall. And so often what I'm doing at the beginning is making marks and figuring out what kind of mark can I make for hours on end? What happens when they start to stack up on top of each other? Do they create any illusion or anything? And then figuring out sort of the logistics of how much material I'm going to need, how much time it will take to do the project. So usually it starts for me with these gestures. It's another study piece behind me here. These are all pretty large. The smallest dimension on any of these is 3 feet, and larger dimension is just over 6 feet long. So that's a lot of what I have on the wall at the moment. I have to spin this camera around. What I wanted to do today anyway was a lot of what's been happening, being isolated and locked away, has gotten me thinking a little bit more about older work and this idea of a separation almost from the work of the past. These are a series of sound drawings that I had made in the past. And so there's still a contact microphone. That red dot that's on there is a contact microphone that's adhered to these pieces. And I will bring the camera closer in a second, but all of these sound drawings that I've done were done in 2016. And they're done blindfolded originally, and they were done using only the sound, the contact microphone and China marker. And they were done, in this case, to try to mimic the sound of a tide, of something that was sort of coming in and going out. So having the one contact microphone on the left-hand side here would be the increasing volume of the tide coming in, and then as I move the mark away, you would reduce. All of these, though, were made on tar paper, which is a roofing material. And what happens as over time, these white marks become very amber in color or yellow in color. They leach the tar out of the paper itself, and the white marks age. So the only pure version of that still exists is the audio. The image continues to change, but the sound file that I made will stay static. It won't change over time. Sorry, I bumped that button. I'm coming, hopefully I come back on. There we go, get my camera back online. Sorry, I'm in a corner of my studio. I'm trying to get a good signal for us. So the thought today was to spend just revisiting the past, remake marks that I have not made since 2016. And what will happen is they will be a field, but they are, in my head, they're an echo of past, present, and do a piece for us today that had some of the, I guess, an honest reflection of where I am right.
Kevin, you're a little bit
thinking about where things be.
You're starting to freeze a little bit, so maybe disconnect and come back again to us.
Okay. Okay. Better.
Okay. The frame is great. I don't know about the sound.
Okay, let's see if I'm not stuttering any longer.
That's good.
You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
We will see if this is going to work or not.
Let's give it a try.
I have headphones in, so I can still hear you if you need to get me, even though I'm away from the screen.
No, the stage is yours. Go ahead. Another freeze there, Kevin. Sorry. Here we go.
Would it help if we actually...
I can't hear you, Sonia. Sorry.
I'm just wondering maybe if it would help if we just went off video, the rest of us, so that just to clear up some bandwidth.
I think it's on the end of Kevin. It's just a bad connection there. We tried a little bit before, but he will try to log in again in a minute, and maybe it will be better. It's just I think it's the corner of the studio that is less.
That's why
you might have to let him in again, the meeting,
Sorry?
You might have to allow him back in the meeting.
No, it's an automatic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll just give him a little bit more time. Yeah, those waiting rooms are it's just like a monster. I try to avoid that. Here we go.
Of course, everything goes wrong the moment the performative part starts, right?
No, it's okay. I think now we're good. And if not, we'll start it again. This is the format. We're flexible here.
This is the challenge, right? I have no clue at what point things change, but so I don't know if you can begin to see what happened, the difference in the color of the marks, despite the fact that it's the same tool, the exact same drawing tool, just fresh versus the aged version. I'm not sure if you were able to hear if the sound was able to come through or not for you all, if you could hear the audio. Or one of the things I know that Zoom does is sometimes it cuts out things that it perceives as loud noises so that it prevents them from going through. So I'm not sure if you could even hear that. I don't want to waste your time watching something that doesn't work.
Just a second, Kevin. I think you were frozen while you were doing the drawing. So will you be able to continue a little bit more? So I didn't have the chance to understand the action.
Yes, I can try. Yeah, let me try and see. Wondering if there's if I can. I'm happy to do it again and to continue. I have to figure out, the moment I turn my back to the camera, I no longer know if it's working or not though. So I will try and see if we can do this again. Let's see. Okay, is the video working now at this point?
Yes, there's no.
Okay. Okay, and then let's see. We'll see if we can get this to work.
Okay, thanks. Excellent, yes.
Okay, you can hear the sound now.
Thanks, yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's try again. So one of the problems for me in doing this, I'm gonna move back down the other way. I can pull the camera up to the wall. That seems to be what causes the problem. But one of the big problems that for me in doing a performance like this, where I also have to do the camera, is that a whole point of the way that I engineer the drawings that I do is that they sort of begin to induce almost a hypnotic state for me. That I can get lost in. And for me, a lot of the technical pieces of doing a conversation like this and the apprehension around technology and stuff like that while managing it myself definitely made that, what I just did, feel a little less authentic. It felt like I was sort of doing a cooking show where I already have something sort of ready to go and performing it, you know, and popping it out, and because I wanted to make sure that it would work, but it doesn't resonate with me in the same way that the other kinds of works that I seek to do. Like I said, in general, the whole point of the way that I think about what I'm doing is that the repetition, the sort of obsessive repetition, begins to become a meditative state that allows the space between thought and action to collapse, and it allows the anticipating the future to disappear. I don't have to worry about what the drawing is going to look like. I just have to focus on the action that I'm taking at that moment, and only that moment, and I sort of trust that it will all work out, and then just go. And in a situation like this, where I'm alone in my studio because of the pandemic, I don't have somebody else helping me out or anything, I think it's more challenging for me to authentically get back into that space to give you a real performance. So while I can show you how that was made, I also feel like I want to be very honest about it. And for me, it doesn't feel the way that a performative piece traditionally feels for me. And I think that's to me, that's one of the challenges of a medium like this, of communicating this way, where you are the technician and the artist simultaneously, where you're the cameraman and making the work at the same time. So I think I'm excited to have been able to play with a piece like this, but I also immediately feel a bit of a personal need to confess that, like that there's something missing there. It's not quite there for the way that I normally like to work, I guess.
But listen, Kevin, I think we also have another obstacle, which we're not participated, because once you started to draw and you stopped talking, I think few of you there lost you, because there was like a minus sounds going on. I don't know. I saw it actually, but I don't know how many of you from the 12 participate people were able. I know that Carrie was not able to see. Anyone else was not able to see because there was no talking?
It came back though.
It came back at the middle.
Yeah, I did get to see some.
I see. Okay.
So one thing that you just for future, one thing that we can do if you do more of these later on, is one person can be assigned to be your partner and take the pressure off of you while you're talking, and they can actually run the Zoom things and just pin that screen so that
it will stay stable. Yeah,
doesn't cut away. Yeah, we refer to it as, right now it's just you and I that are the managers of this conversation. If we had a third person who could be in charge of that might help you in the future.
Excellent. Yeah.
I volunteer to help later on. I'll be part of these as they go. So I volunteer any technical assistance.
Excellent. Thanks. Actually, I found it, although there were few obstacles there in the demonstration, I'll call it, but I found it really interesting going and following your sound and your movements, and it was quite surprising in a way. Like I always have this feeling when I see your work, to try to imagine like how you the tempo, of course, and how you kind of like progress in your mark making. But for me it was surprising because there was kind of like, maybe because of also the flat microphone that you choose to work with, but it was kind of like, it was really calm, and I was thinking about more towards the repetitive, obsessive side, and I found it really surprisingly calm, or surprisingly like atmosphere or spacey. So thanks for sharing this with us.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. I think for me, that's the thing. That's one of the things that happens a lot in my work. The tempo is generally, the documentation often makes it look far faster because it's really hard, you know, to watch 48 hours worth of video of something being drawn is really tedious. And so, you know, it always, I use time lapse or other things, and it gives this sense that the marks are often quite quick. Almost all of the marks, with like, except for something like this, even these ones here that are more short and choppy, they are all very slow and controlled, and usually take 3 seconds from start to end. And it's for me, a lot of that came from the idea that humans don't have the capacity to have more than a 3-second present, and so that was the initial start of making these marks, was thinking that each mark was a moment of the present. And since the present, according to scientists, is only 3 seconds long, then each mark should only be 3 seconds long. And so usually the shortest marks I make are still almost 3 seconds in duration to be able to, from the top to the bottom. And for me, the obsessiveness, I do end up equating more with meditation than with frenetic. It's for me, a lot of what I'm interested in with obsession is shifting a little bit of the culture, the way that we talk about obsession. It's a natural part of my personality, but I don't see it as a pejorative one. I don't see it as something that is inherently negative. For me, I see it more as a single-mindedness, and when focused, it has its benefit. That obsession unfocused could be detrimental, right? And but when focused, it can be leveraged. And so the thing that I find super interesting is the way that my experience of time shifts because of that. You know, making these marks for 48 hours, I get done and I feel like it's, you know, it's been 6 hours. Like the dilation of time is totally something that I'm fascinated by in all of this process. And the thing I struggle with, I think often when performing, is understanding that my experience as the maker and the audience's experience of time are not the same. And so I think that at times I'm concerned that what I'm doing looks painfully slow to an audience, and it feels like it's moving very quickly to me, or vice versa, you know, that it feels like it's moving very quickly to the audience and moving very slow to me. So I'm often very interested in that, in the disconnect of the way that we're experiencing the same duration of time. And so that's, for me, that's a lot of what I'm playing with when I'm making the work, is that sort of, we are sharing the same duration, but we're experiencing it completely differently.
Interesting, absolutely. Kevin, at this point, can I, in our studio visit, can I ask you, please, maybe to bring forward few close-ups from new pieces that you're working on, and show us like more close-up, because we kind of got a general look to your studio, and I would like to go a little bit closer to the works themselves, if you can.
Sure.
Just bring it
Of
over,
course.
maybe, not too, no?
Well, that's a little harder.
Yeah?
Bringing work to the camera is a little harder.
So whatever is working better. I'm just concerning that you will disconnect, but you can get and reconnect. Yeah, okay.
So there are some that are on paper that I could probably bring closer. But let's see. I'm wondering if I can actually flip. Hold on one second. Let's see if I can do anything to do
Kevin,
this.
sorry for interrupting. Especially the ones that you started pretty recently. I noticed that you are kind of like researching for new marks and new way of making marks. So I don't know if you.
So you mean in this pieces like this here, or
I
something
noticed
that you've seen?
Sorry, I noticed that you started to kind of like, instead of vertical lines, started to investigate circle lines
sure.
really recently. Sorry for directing.
Yes, yes.
Maybe it's...
No, that's perfect. It helps me. It helps to know. So yeah, these are some of the newest experiments. And so these, I mean, this is actually a study for a public commission for the lobby of a building in downtown Kansas City. So I'm getting very close. Hopefully you can see okay. So this entire section here, each of these sections is one continuous line. So each little circle, as I get closer to them, each little circle is made 3 times. So it's one continuous line that loops around a spot on the paper 3 times before moving to another place on the paper. So there are this whole drawing is only 3 lines. It's only 3 individual lines that are made, one in the top section, one in the bottom section, and then the one that crosses them.
I'll see, just like doing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Yep. It's just a constant, sort of constantly in motion, moving around the page. Mm-hmm. So, and usually the way that I work, in this case, I don't usually use masking tape or tape to do the boundaries. I usually use a string so that it's flexible and fluid and I can respond to it. But in this case, I actually did have a sheet of paper to be able to contain the shapes and to play with thinking about how I would do this at scale, because the place where this is supposed to go is 48 feet tall and 36 feet wide. So this, in execution, theoretically, each of these circles would be about 1.5 feet to 2 feet wide. They'd be very large in actual execution. So a lot of what I'm working on right now, oddly, in the pandemic, has been things that are more commission based. And the thing that has been really interesting to me is that people are interested not in commissioning based on the way it looks, but are really interested in commissioning a time-based or durational-based drawing and for a site, and then allowing me to make the work for that site without any real plan. This is the first client that I've had that wanted some idea of what it might look like before they approved the piece, but they're still very open to the idea that things might change or along the way. So now,
Kevin, will this be a mural? So it's going to be a mural?
It has not been approved yet as a final decision yet, but it is being considered for a mural project. Yes.
So because it's going to be enlarged, are you going to use a different medium to make it?
Yes, and so that's the thing that I've been playing a lot with is what material will work in terms of being able to create the mark that I want it to make, and that will, I guess, hold up at the scale. So far, I've been running through a bunch of different tests, and I've been unsatisfied with the stuff at scale. So I don't know what the final material will be just yet. This is done with like a gel ink, and one of the benefits is that the faster you go, the lighter the ink shows up. And so I'm looking for a material that's sort of in white that has that same sort of characteristic, that working quickly results in a lighter toned line and working slower results in a darker, more rich white. And I've been playing with different kinds of acrylic paints, different kinds of pens, different kinds of, normally I would say chalk or oil pastel, but this needs to be archival and exist on the wall in a public space. And so in the lobby of a building. So the materials are changing and trying to figure out what satisfies everything is becoming a research project that has taken far longer than I anticipated. So I still don't know how that will be executed, or honestly, I don't know that it will be approved yet. So we'll see. It may not end up being approved at the end of the day. So we'll see. But that is I think that's the piece you're talking about, Ram, with the circles. I did do one on I have a rehearsal wall, and I did do one that was larger on the wall. And I did that one in colored pencil, and it worked great, but the colored pencil acted as a dust magnet over time, and it got more dull as it sat on the wall for a week or two, and it did hold its bright white. It got more dull as time went on. So it won't work for something unless I seal it in a public space.
And Kevin, can you tell us a little bit more if we are talking about material and transforming it from scales and projects? Can you tell us a little bit of your last huge project, the wall that you painted, and how you ended up, which material you did the sketches, or if you can show us maybe, but and how you ended up with this marker, like an unremovable marker?
Most of the sketches are actually, they've been coming down in my studio now, but so all of my rehearsal sketches for that piece are still all here on the studio floor. And it went through quite a lot of iterations. So this is one of the things that I quite like, is the finding a scale of a marker where the negative spaces start to become active. And so the spaces in between the marks start to read like marks. So for this particular piece, same thing. I started the original piece that they saw that made them want it on the side of a building was done with an extremely fine point pen, and it was drawn incredibly small. It was a 20-inch square drawing originally that they saw, and when I started to scale it up, looking for something that would be permanent, I ended up researching what graffiti writers were using in order to make the
freeze. Kevin, you freeze, unfortunately. Okay, while we're waiting for Kevin to come back to us, is it everywhere freeze now? Sonia, can you hear or see Kevin? Okay. No audio.
Yeah, sorry, the meeting kicked me out for a second, so let me flip this back. I think it's my signal. I don't think it has anything to do with you. We're getting snow here right now, so we're in the middle. No. I think it's everything has been great. The weather here has been fantastic, and today we're in the middle of a snowstorm. So I got to my studio before they requested that people get off of the roads.
I have to say that showing us the sketches you just showed us, I think this is this is where I was going with thinking about coming to see things that are not usually seen, not also on online, like those small things, or those small sketches, or things that are kind of like the backstage of what we're doing. And I find it really interesting. It's just like standing by itself, of course. Can
I ask a question about those marks?
Yes, I think it's great to open the discussion at that point for anybody that want to join. And, please do. Because
those marks, because I know the mural is like a negative, but these marks are actually positive. Because the wall was black and your marks were white. I find it very interesting that your marks are, like you said, like it was almost like the negative space was making a mark rather than the mark. So while this was a test piece for you, would that be then a starting point to start something completely new now that you discovered that this is sort of like becoming the opposite that you've been working as in white on black?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think that's why it's lived in my studio for so long, because there's the feeling that I'm not done with it yet, but I'm not sure what I want to do with it next, I guess. And that's, those are sort of the things that I'm playing with. And like, even this piece that's on the wall now was sort of trying to figure out how much is too much and how far could I push that sort of relationship between the positive and negative. And really, you know, and for me, I think it's very much the beginning of something different. And I'm in a spot, like I said, where right now what's happening.
It's very dynamic. It looks, when you're filling it to black rather than from layering white onto black. Now putting the black on, it sort of seems like you got an intense amount of depth in there. Even though the marks sort of remain the same, it's completely flipped in how you perceive it. It's great.
Well, thank you. These are things that are like this was done 2 weeks ago, maybe. So this is also very new.
What I found interesting is that the white space is becoming really noticeable and giving a three-dimension feeling other than the black spots, like the black marks, of course. So like it's really dominant suddenly.
So is this with a texture? Because the other works you used chalk a lot, you used a lot of pencil. So this looks a lot more like a prominent mark.
Yes. So this is the same material that I used on the exterior of the building. It's a graffiti writer's ink that's manufactured in Germany. That is an ink compound that has metal combinations in it, and then has a binder that makes it permanent. And so it's a 60 millimeter long tip on the marker. So it's quite a big marker, and I'm using it vertically in this case. I can use it the other direction. I've never used and made a 60 millimeter wide mark. I always use it vertically, but it's a pretty beefy tool. And it's quite, I don't know, it's very seductive. It's very fun to work with. The ink is black, is really jet black, and has a bit of a reflective quality to it as well. And this is like a synthetic, this material is a synthetic leather that I'm working on, because I wanted the texture. After working on a cement wall, I wanted something that had a texture that I didn't make, that came with its own texture to begin to respond to. I like the idea of two histories sort of rubbing up against each other in a really thin space, a surface that has its own character, and then something being added to that, and those two things being in dialogue rather than making a perfect surface and working on it.
So I'm curious now with this marker though, because I've worked with a lot of graffiti markers myself. Most of them you've got to shake real hard and then press the tip real hard to get the ink to come out. So I wonder which one you're using.
Well, before this conversation is over, before we leave our meeting today, I'll run and grab one and show you the brand and everything that I'm using in case you want to explore.
Yeah, technical things are later on. Let's focus.
Yeah, I'm happy, but I'm happy to share the wealth, and it's, like I said, it's a fantastic tool. And one of the things I liked about the company that I got them from is that they're everything is reusable and refillable, and so they're not one-time single-use materials. They can be refilled, they can be reused, and you can order new parts for the entire mechanism, new tips, new springs, new pumps, new ink. And so I think I have probably 40 of themselves, but they're the only pens I'll ever need.
Freeze again.
Did I freeze again?
Here we go. At this stage, I think if it's okay with you guys, freeze again.
Frozen.
Yeah. At this stage, maybe some of you, if you would like to come out of the mute and maybe ask Kevin a question regarding to his work or to the things that you saw in the studio, but Kevin is freezing. God bless Zoom.
Hi everyone. Hi Kevin. Thanks. Beautiful work. Really enjoyed hearing you talk about it. I too make large, repetitive mark performance drawings, and I'm interested. You talk about the sort of meditative state that you go into, and that for me, I quite often don't reach that state, and I'm interested in this kind of tension. Like you talk about the meditative sort of state, and you also talk about when you're testing marks or auditioning marks, you're thinking about what kinds of marks can your body actually make, you know, for repetitively. And I'm just interested because I think a lot of performance drawers and artists talk about this meditative state. I myself quite often am held back from that because my body is keeping me in the present, because when we do these large drawings, quite often it's a physical thing, and there might be, you know, your body's actually sort of protesting, or you're playing out a mental sort of thing about the location. Or sometimes I think about my drawing as in real estate, like there's a sort of a sweet spot in the middle where it's really comfortable to draw, but then it gets really uncomfortable at that end. So I might treat myself by going a little bit, you know, in the middle, but then I got to go back out and do that bit. So I'm interested in that sort of body feedback and how that might interrupt that meditative state. And I'm also interested in, obviously we got to see how it felt differently for you with us sort of all looking at you performing that drawing in the studio, whether you feel you can truly reach that meditative state when you are actually performing in front of an audience, or whether you're kind of keenly aware of that audience. So just, yeah, that
sure.
Interested in that meditative state you talk about.
Yeah, for me, I think I don't want to give it any false illusions either. It's not a consistent meditative state for sure. It's not. It persists for quite long, and it doesn't always work. You know, like that's the thing for me. That's the thing that I'm aiming for often, is hoping to be able to engineer that. But I think that the reality is that I'm not entirely able to guarantee that will happen every single time. So the goal, I guess, is often to recreate the factors that do contribute to that. Is everybody still here?
Yeah, you freeze a little bit. So.
Dropped out.
Kevin, are you with us? Okay. Let Kevin reconnect again.
Okay, sorry. Everybody else froze. I didn't know if people could hear me or not. I could see everybody's faces, but they were all still. So did you hear any of my answer, or did it go away right away?
Just, yeah, most of it. And just the end was cut. Sorry.
Okay, so I think what I generally experience is more like waves, and in of these sort of more hypnotic, or I want to say it's more hypnotic than meditative, maybe, if we're being totally honest. Like, I associate it with meditation because there's a calm feeling for me, but I actually wonder if there's not just this degrees of self-hypnosis that are happening there, where you're sort of repeating things so much that they become autopilot. And so I agree with you. My body does scream at me at times. Absolutely. but I also I equate it with, at a certain point, like driving or other things, I'm looking to make a mark that I don't have to think actively about every single time that I'm making it. And science can tell us that most of the time when we're driving, we're actually in a kind of self-hypnosis, that we are not in a fully present state. We are in a post-hypnotic state, and we are driving without using nearly as much of our brain as we would require for a task that's so complex. And so I associate these sort of states with that kind of thing. It's become so ritual or so routine that I'm just doing. To me, the present, the past, and the future are all touching each other very, very closely, and the boundaries are very, very thin there. I would not say that I transcend my body in any way, shape, or form. I think that for me, that the physical aspects of it do sort of get dialed down. There is almost a tunnel vision for me personally. And I think those are the kinds of things that are totally for me, and really maybe not for the audience at all. They're the things that I look for to make the work. And I'm not sure how much that matters at all to an audience of other people who are performers. I think it's an interesting thing to talk about, but it's not something I typically talk too much about in my process, because I'm pretty selfish about it, honestly. It's something that got stretched to its limit working in a crane on the side of a building, but it got really interesting to see what would happen, and how I had an operator with me in lift who would move me around, and I legitimately had no idea how long I would stay in any one spot. And we got to a place after 4 or 5 days, he could watch me, and he could sort of understand and begin to anticipate where I might want to go next. But it really was sort of this check in, check out, check in, check out. And I have no idea how long we stayed in individual spots. I just knew, like, sort of when the marks started to get filled up, I'd say, hey, can we go up, to about my knee level? And we'd go up, and I'd go again. And it was really fascinating at the end of the week to talk to him about the whole thing. And from his perspective, he thought I was completely nuts, because he's like, how do you know when to move? How do you know what to do? Like, he's like, I don't understand what you're looking for and what you're doing. And, I'm working on a piece that's meant to be seen from the ground. I'm 50 feet in the air, looking at it next to the wall in a way that nobody else will ever see it before. And so the answer is, I don't know what I'm looking for. I'm just trusting that these marks are going to add up to something when we come down, and that the spaces between them are going to create a feeling of movement, and they're going to create a feeling of depth, because I've rehearsed them before. And so I think I feel liberated in the way that I make, because I've done the research ahead of time to know what the marks feel like. And then I get to be a viewer of my work. In this case, in that case of the building, when it pivoted down, I saw it for the first time with everybody else. I really had no clue what it looked like. And so it's a very long-winded answer, but for me, the thing that I try to do is take away the anticipation of what it will look like. And that's the piece that I rely on pretty heavily, is removing the anticipation or feeling of executing a plan as much as possible, and sort of understanding that I'm operating within boundaries that will yield a result that I have some degree of faith in what it will look like, but I'm not aiming for a specific set of outcomes. I don't necessarily always know the exact amount of negative space that's going to be left, or things like that. I legitimately also use time as the marker. So the commissioned piece was a 40-hour durational drawing, and I ran a timer every time I was drawing. And when 40 hours hit, the drawing was done. Whether the spaces were filled aesthetically to my liking or not, it was a 40-hour durational drawing. And for me, that's the other piece that maybe keeps me honest, and keeps me from that obsessive personality, constantly digging back and thinking, what could I have done different? What could I have done? And it gives me some degree of peace with the way things come out, even if they're not what I expected.
Interesting.
Can I ask a question then? Because it's all time-based and the marks are time, what was it, $1 a mark?
Oddly enough, it was a 40-hour work week. But because it was a construction project, I billed the project by the square foot. And so the square foot of the overall drawing, and I priced my commission similar to what building materials or other surfacing materials would be to cover that same amount of square footage. And so my labor was no different than the labor of the person who built the wall in terms of the pay structure.
Sorry, because we have just a little bit more time left, I would like to open up to other people, one or two more questions. Anybody would like to come from the mute and ask Kevin about different subject?
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. I'm interested in, you spoke about the rehearsal sketches and what the mocks feel like. So before you go into a larger project, you said you had a rehearsal wall. You'd actually not plan it, but feel it.
Yeah, I think the reality is very much I'm getting older, and so how they feel definitely matter to my body. You know, drawing over your head for large chunks of time is pretty challenging, actually. And so one of the other things that I need to be able to do is make sure that every mark I can make with both hands. Okay. Because fatigue is very real. And so I often, when I'm rehearsing them, I'm rehearsing them absolutely for, first and foremost, for what they look like is where I start, the aesthetic qualities of them. How do they feel for my body? Can I make them consistently? And then the second part is really trying, okay, well, let's see what happens. Let me make 3-hour drawing and see how my body feels. If I make these marks for 3 hours, how does my body feel tomorrow? How does my body feel 2 days later? And then with the case of this building, I think I made there's six different drawings at scale. So I made 6 different 6-hour drawings to prepare myself. There's an accidental endurance aspect to the work that is not at all what motivates me, but it's a byproduct of the process of wanting extended durations to be the work, and then realizing my shoulders are hurting talking about it. It's weird. Realizing that as I get older, what that might be different. You know, it may have to change significantly. So the other feel for me is how much it slips and how much it sticks the mark. I want the thing that makes all of the work that I end up making happen is the imperfection in the mark. The fact that the mark does not retain its integrity from top to bottom. Actually, the thing that creates all the illusion of depth or movement in the work, it's not the mark itself, it's where the mark degrades. And so the other piece of doing these rehearsal marks is to understand how much variation can I get in a mark from top to bottom, and how does my body need to move to get that variation? Am I moving away from the wall, or am I moving slow then fast, or am I pushing in and releasing? You know, like trying to figure out how to get those degrees of change in the mark is the other part of that.
Another question?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Sure. I was just wondering, what sort of time period do you work in a day when you're doing this kind of thing? So the 40-hour working week, did you do 8-hour days, or
yes.
how long can you sustain it for? The endurance aspect.
Sure. I think this. So I started making work like this in around 2013, and at the beginning of the work, I was way more interested in pushing the limits of how long I could work for. There was something that was very appealing about being on the edge of control or the edge of my physical ability, or there was something that was very curious to me. And so one of the erasings that I did, I literally did overnight in a gallery. So I went in, started at noon, and the show was going to open at 6 a.m. the next day. And so there was a real ticking clock happening with the piece, and I worked straight through the night. And that was ended up being 18 hours of nonstop work. And it was an erasing, and it's if you go back through my Instagram, it's a very long horizontal graphite erasing, and so the walls had to be buffed in graphite and then erasing afterwards. that's the longest if one stretch was 18 hours. Doing that ruined me. I was using plastic erasers. I had blisters on my hands from the heat buildup in the eraser. Because the friction in the eraser would heat it up. And so by the end of that 18 hours, both my hands were covered in duct tape to prevent further blisters, trying to figure this out. I'd committed to this thing without fully understanding what 18 hours of working was going to feel like to my body. And now it's much more normalized. I tend to treat it like a normal workday. So the 40-hour piece was 5 8-hour workdays. I took my lunch break with my operator every day, and I worked on his schedule. I showed up at the hours that he arrived to work to the job site and worked alongside him for the duration of the day. And I stopped when his day ended. And so it really, the neighborhood where that piece happened is a very working class neighborhood. It's an old exchange neighborhood. And for me, I wanted the labor to be sort of in keeping with what that neighborhood's history was. And then I had my accidental collaborator, and I wanted to make sure that those things were in line with his day. I didn't want to extend his day and put upon him. So so typically 8 hours is the chunk. 12 hours still feels pretty good for me. I can work 12 hours at a stretch as long as I have water.
Yeah, the longest I've done is 16. So
I gotta say, I don't
move
love it
for a week.
Yep. The other thing I don't like about it, though, if I break it into smaller sections, though, is that I find myself making this, like, wanting to edit it in the process versus just letting it happen. Like, so if the durations get too short and I step back frequently, I put myself into the mind of the viewer instead of the mind of the maker, and I think that I don't like that. So I prefer that sort of medium to long duration for working time.
Yeah, it gives it time for something to happen. There was one other point when you were talking about the meditative state, and I've been researching about flow state. Yeah, you know, Cheek Sent Me High work, and I think it's that kind of that borderline between doing something that could be boring. But it's just interesting enough to keep you away from being like going completely stir crazy. But yeah, and repeating it so much that, and it's that kind of being in the zone, isn't it? That's and you do come in, and I really got what you mean about the waves. Yeah, I really and that really resonated. That it sort of it just happens, and then something can just break it and you're out of the zone, and it could just be a noise or something totally unrelated to the work in a way. I found it really difficult to get in that zone whilst performing. Working in the studio, I find it much easier, but when there's an audience, I think I'm always slightly more aware.
I think it takes me upwards of half an hour when there's an audience around to be able to get there. And I'm very caught in that first 30 minutes, you know, I'm guessing at time here, you know, what feels like half an hour, I guess, because I don't wear a watch or anything. And so there is a hesitation, there's an anticipation, there's this feeling of, there's no information for them to respond to at the beginning, and there's nothing for me to respond to at the beginning, right? It's cold. And I think in the studio, it's like a light switch. You can get there pretty quick. And when I'm performing, the thing I've started to do is I won't listen to music, because music has its own tempo and its own time, but I will listen to fiction. And so one of the things that helps me often is to get lost in another timeline that is not the one that I'm in order to get into that state. The added weirdness is that I can go back and look at the drawing, and I can hear the audiobook being read to me, you know, and it's like grooves on a wax record. I almost know what part of the book was happening when I was in this section. But when I've struggled to find that deeper sort of experience of time, I rely on listening to fiction to get me there.
Okay, I count.
That's the way I start. I started with metronomes and counting. Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Last question, maybe somebody, or shall I go? Anybody? So
well, I've been wondering. Oh, sorry. I thought one last question. I found it very interesting. You said you started in 2013 that you started making these marks. What sort of drawings were you doing before?
Well, I would say that I was making these, I've always been making these drawings. They were just much smaller in relationship to the overall images that were being made. What happened, my normal artist talk is sort of setting the stage for this. In 2013, my son turned 5 and I was a stay-at-home dad with him for his first 5 years. And so what happened is my time was incredibly limited. I made drawings that were abstract, but they were all often very sort of, they were almost blueprints for installations that would never happen, would be the way that I would describe them. Not too dissimilar to the work of like Russian paper architects who would draw elaborate plans for buildings that would never be made. I was spending a lot of time making drawings and plans for installation projects that would never be realized. And then after staying home with my son, I had less and less time to make. I continued to make, and I was less and less satisfied with what I was making, and realizing that if I had limited time, I wanted to focus on the parts of the work that actually were compelling or interesting to me. And so I felt like I kind of zoomed in to the work that I was doing and stopped making work that was about time and that contained time or that was directly related to it rather than trying to illustrate it. And I took the aspects that were undeniable in my work, the sort of the heavy-handed mark making, and made it the center of everything that I was doing. So if you zoomed into any of my before 2013, you'd see a lot of the same marks used, potentially, not the same marks, but maybe a similar approach to mark making being used to build value or create the illusion of depth or space. And then, like I said, then I just, at that point, I felt like I needed to escape something. I also had this experience of feeling like an imposter and feeling like I was no longer a real artist, and had totally forfeited my artist identity and assumed a dad identity. And so when I started making these drawings, the first places I did them was in places that nobody wanted them. So I drew them in restrooms, in public places. I drew them on the sidewalks. I drew them, in the midst of a train station where people were commuting. And part of it was to see how long they would last. They were made in chalk, they were made temporarily. And I was really just curious, did anybody care? Was anybody interested in what I was doing, or was I on my own sort of little trip in my own little space and struggling to find something? So I stopped making plans and started taking actions, I guess, is the very short and sweet version of it.
That's great sentence to finish up with. And yeah, it's summarized quite a lot of things that relate to what we're doing and what we're thinking. I think we passed the 1 hour I intended to, and I want to thank you all for joining us, and thank you very much, Kevin, for hosting us and showing us, open your studio and talking with us. It was a pleasure, a 1 hour pleasure. And I hope a few more meetings will come up as we go.
Yeah, thanks for letting me be a participant in this. This is awesome. I'm sorry for all the technical difficulties. I didn't anticipate a snowstorm today. I do have that marker people were wondering about. I wanted to make sure that I brought it back. The brand is Molotov, but it is the marker itself is called a coverall marker, and you can see the tip is quite large. So that is of the pen, and it's a pretty big. It's almost like a shoe shine kind of tip, like the old school shoe shine materials that you would have. And then this refillable reservoir here can get refilled with the ink. The ink is quite expensive, but it's fantastic. But it's, yeah, so it's a Molotov cover-all marker is what it's called. And you can find them occasionally here in the United States. You can't buy them over the counter very often. So I did end up having to order a quantity of them from Germany rather than being able to get them here, because the ink can't be painted over. If you paint white over the ink, the black mark will bleed back through the white ink, the white paint. So it can never be painted over. It continually sort of comes forward.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you all. I really appreciate all the questions. I thank you for taking time out of your days. It was really great to see some of you in little boxes on the screen. I appreciate being able to hear your voices, and I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm looking forward to who we get to have a conversation with next.
Thanks a lot, and I do believe that it's really a relevant format, and I'm really hoping that this whole situation and pandemic will over really quickly. But I have a feeling that this format will keep staying with us, because it's allowing us to reach people all over, and it's quite brilliant from my side of view, where I'm eager to connect with other that share and relate to the practice that I'm interested in. Thank you all. See you next time. Bye, guys.
Thank you for organizing this. I appreciate it.
Cheers. Thanks.